Okay, so this is part 6, and at last we are on what will be the final segment of A Country Defeated in Victory by James Montgomery. And no, you're not going to find this anyplace else, but you should. You should. All right, here we go. Part 6. Economics of Central Banking. Since division of labor is the key to all human achievement and satisfaction, a system of exchange is crucial. Barter is hopelessly complicated. A command economy in which each is told what to do and how he will be compensated is also hopelessly cumbersome and fails to take advantage of individual initiative, ability, and concrete knowledge. A medium of exchange, money, is the obvious solution. When left to themselves, people of a given geographical area settled upon a durable luxury commodity, usually gold or silver, to use as money. Because money is a store of value, as well as a medium of exchange, people saved part of their gold income rather than spending it all. This gold was often stored in the vaults of a local goldsmith, the precursor of the modern banker, for safekeeping. The depositor received a receipt that entitled him to an equal quantity and quality of gold on demand from the goldsmith. This receipt could be negotiable by endorsing it over to a seller of goods who in turn could exchange the receipt for gold from the goldsmith. Either the receipt or the gold served as money, and the receipt was easier to carry than transporting the gold it represented. Moreover, the receipt was useless to a thief without the endorsing signature. At some point, a goldsmith realized that there was no reason he couldn't loan out some of the gold for interest as long as he kept gold on hand sufficient to meet the fairly predictable withdrawal rate. After all, he promised simply to pay on demand, not hold the gold as such. Better yet, he could simply issue more receipts for gold than he had gold on hand, and the receipts, renamed notes, could circulate freely among the populace as money. However, he soon found that there was a definite limit set on this process by reality. Not all the extra notes he issued circulated forever among the public. The rate of note redemption began to increase rapidly as the receipts passed into the hands of people unfamiliar with his reputation, and especially when competitive goldsmiths, always eager for more gold reserves, came into possession of his notes. To prevent a disastrous run on his gold reserves, note issuance had to be kept within bounds. But the spending power of over-issuance was a grave temptation. Especially relished was the power over government, industry, and merchants that the miraculous loan power of the goldsmith could obtain. Many succumbed to temptation, overextended themselves, and brought ruin to their depositors, while others slowly became wealthy bankers by pursuing conservative loan policies. According to present-day reasoning, central banks are instituted to protect the public from periodic financial catastrophe at the hands of unscrupulous fractional reserve bankers. The excuse given as protection is far from the truth. Central banks are established to remove the limitation on overissuance that reality normally places on a competitive banking system. As early as ancient Babylon and India, central banking, the art of monopolizing the issuance of money, had been developed into a perfect method for looting the general public. Even today, many bankers copy the traditions of the earlier exploitative priesthoods and design their banks to resemble temples. Defenses of central banking are simply part of the deception that lies at the heart of all power elites. Let's look at the way a new central bank is created where none had existed previously. We bankers approach the king or ruling assembly, both of whom always want more money to fight wars or curry favor with the people, and typically are ignorant of economics, with a compelling proposal. Grant our bank a national charter to regulate private banking and to issue legal tender notes, that is, force our notes to be accepted as payments for all debts, public and private. In exchange, we will provide the government all the notes it prudently requires at interest rates easily payable out of existing taxes. The increased government purchasing power thus created will simultaneously assure the power and prestige of the currently precarious nation and stimulate the sluggish, credit-starved economy to new heights of prosperity. Most important, the violent banking panics and credit collapses caused by unscrupulous private bankers will be replaced by our even-handed, beneficent, and scientific management of money and banking. Our public-spirited expertise will be at the disposal of the state, while we remain independent enough of momentary political pressures to assure sound management. For a while, this system seems to work remarkably well, with full employment for everyone. The government and public does not notice that we, issuers of the new notes, are using the notes we create out of thin air to surreptitiously build economic empires at the expense of established interests. Because of the legal tender laws, few of the new notes issued by the central bank are returned or redeemed in gold. In fact, private banks and even a few foreign banks may begin to use the central bank's notes as reserves or further issuance of credit. Soon, though, prices begin to rise as the added notes increase demand relative to the quantity of goods and services available. As the value of their savings decline more and more, foreigners in particular begin to question the value of the central bank's notes and start to demand redemption in gold. We, of course, do not admit responsibility for the rampant inflation when it comes. We blame inflation on evil speculators who drive up prices for personal gain. And that's exactly what modern propaganda and modern indoctrinating, brainwashing, dumbed-down public school history classes will tell their students. And in universities, too. They'll tell their students that the crash of 1929 was caused by those evil speculators. And they'll never tell you that it was caused by the banksters. They'll never do that. Interesting. That's exactly what is being written about here. All right, where was I? We blame inflation on evil speculators who drive up prices for personal gain, as well as the greed of organized labor and businesses who are promptly made subject to wage and price controls. Even the consumer can be made to feel guilty for agreeing to pay the high prices. Mistaking symptoms for causes, the government accepts the banker's analysis of the problem and continues to give the bank free rein in monetary policy. By slowing the rate of note issuance periodically, the ultimate crisis stage is postponed until many decades after the original central bank charter was granted. Before the rapidly dwindling gold reserves, on which faith in our bank depends, is exhausted, we abruptly contract our loan volume to private industry and government as well. With the contraction of the money supply, a great deflationary crash begins in earnest, with all its attendant unemployment, bankruptcies, and civil strife. We do not admit responsibility for the depression. We blame it on evil hoarders who are refusing to spend their money, and on the prophets of doom who are spoiling business confidence. The government accepts this analysis and leaves monetary policy in our hands. If things go well, we bankers channel the fury and unrest into puppet movements and pressure groups that carry our agents into full control of the government. Once in charge, we devalue our outstanding banknotes in terms of gold and make them inconvertible for all but possibly foreign central banks, and begin plans to restore a prosperity that will be totally ours. When lucky, we're able to confiscate the gold of private citizens as punishment for hoarding during the climax of the Depression. Once the old order is subdued during the chaos of the crash and the desperation of the Depression, the field is open for our full finance capitalist system to be realized, and a new and lasting order can be established. A war timed for this period of consolidation provides the perfect excuse for the regimentation required to crush all opposition. What did Jesus say? The love of money is the root of all evil. The uses of a central bank in a mature economy. Our central banks are private monopolies of the host nation's money and credit issuance, supported by the coercive power of the state. That the central bank can be directly in our hands is vital until our new order is firmly established throughout the governmental, business, intellectual, and political spheres of society. After our order is consolidated, formal nationalization of the central bank, with great fanfare, is usually advisable in order to dispel any lingering suspicion that it is operated for private gain. Of course, only loyal agents of the dynasty are allowed to obtain high offices in the bank, and our power remains intact. Obvious private monopolies are always the targets of sharp reformist agitators. Only the most paranoid, however, can see through the public facade to the private monopoly of the nationalized or quasi-nationalized central bank. The central bank is the primary monopoly on which all our monopolistic power depends. The hidden power of the central bank to create money out of nothing is the fountainhead that fuels our far-flung financial and political empire. Basically, the power of our central bank flows from its control over the points of entry into the economy of new inflationary money, which it creates by fiat. Ordinarily, bills of exchange, acceptances, private bonds, government bonds, and other credit instruments are purchased by the central bank through specially privileged dealers in order to put the new money, often only checking account entries, into circulation. Our purchase of government securities pleases the government, as our purchase of private debt pleases private debtors. As a quid pro quo to assure good management, our agents are given directorships, managerial posts, and offices in the corporations and governments so benefited. As the addiction to the narcotic of inflationary easy credit grows and grows, we demand more and more control of our dependent entourage of governments and corporations. When we finally end the easy credit to combat inflation, unquote, the enterprises and governments either fall directly into our hands, bankrupt, or are rescued at the price of our total control. We ruling bankers control the flow of money in the economy through the wide authority of the central bank to license, audit, and regulate private banks. Banks that loan to interests outside the loyal entourage are audited by the central bank and found to be dangerously overextended. Just a hint of insolvency from the respected central bank is enough to cause a run on the disobedient bank, or at least dry up its vital lines of credit. Soon that bank learns to follow automatically the hints and nods of our agents in the central bank. Further, the periodic cycles of easy money and tight money that we initiate through our control of the central bank cause corresponding fluctuations in all markets. Our inner circle knows in advance the timing of these cycles, and therefore reaps windfall profits by speculating in commodity, stock, currency, gold, and bond markets. Monopolistic stock and commodity exchanges are a vital adjunct to our power, made possible by our central bank powers. We do not allow a fair auction market to exist, but make a great show of tough government regulation to create a false sense of confidence among small investors. With the aid of our regulatory charade and financial power, we are able to maintain exchanges tailored to our entourage's need to manipulate stock prices at the expense of independent investors. Our privileged specialists on the floors of our exchanges, aided by the propaganda of our financial press and brokerage houses, continually play on naivete and greed to drain the savings of the unwary into our coffers. The commodities, securities, and stocks held in trading accounts by our exchange and brokerage houses provides us with a clout far beyond our actual holdings, with which we can manipulate prices and win proxy fights for corporate takeovers. There is little danger to our lucrative operations from public-spirited regulation. Our manipulations are so complex that only the most brilliant experts could comprehend them. To most economists, our exchange operations appear to be helpful efforts to stabilize the market. We ruling bankers become richer and richer as time passes without the annoyance of exerting productive effort of benefit to others. Social and business legislation and policy. The danger to our monopolistic system clearly is not that the people will spontaneously rise up and dispossess us. The people never initiate anything. All successful movements are led from the top by men with vast resources and brilliant plans, usually without the knowledge of the people in the movement. The real danger arises in the upper middle class. Occasionally, these people make vast fortunes through some brilliant technological innovation in their business, or through the favor of local politicians who escaped our influence. Because of their ignorance of the reality of our power, however, the new rich usually fall easily into our hands. For instance, they seldom realize, until too late, that the dozens of loans they may owe to apparently independent banks can be called simultaneously with a mere nod from our top man. Graver danger is presented by those whose enterprises are so successful as to be self-financing. Since the advent of the corporate income tax, truly self-financing corporations are extremely rare now. Most disquieting is when these upstarts acquire the covert or open support and advice from our major international banking antagonists. This is particularly dangerous to us in countries with long democratic traditions, where it is difficult to make our arbitrary rulings stick. The best solution is to enact comprehensive taxes and business regulations in the name of the common good. Such measures reduce the incidence of significant upstart competition to manageable levels. This policy, of course, strangles innovation and productivity. Reduction of the gross national product in countries under our control would be acceptable in the interests of secure power under the pretext of conservation, ecology, or no-growth stability, except that, if carried too far, our clout vis-à-vis our international rivals would be impaired. The most difficult problem for the money lord is determining the level of social and economic freedom he dares allow for the sake of his international power. One method is to maintain a home base of carefully monitored, relative freedom on which to base the economic and military strength required to maintain his empire of totalitarian dictatorships abroad. The following measures are most effective in maintaining our control of nations. 1. A steeply graduated income tax. This does not affect us because our money was accumulated before the tax was imposed, and most of it is now safely protected in our network of tax-exempt foundations. Foundation income and capital can legally be used to finance the bulk of our social, economic, literary, and even political propaganda. In a pinch, it is easily diverted to illegal uses. Expensive studies required by our profitable economic operations can be legitimately financed through our foundations. For the middle classes, income tax makes life into an endless treadmill. Even the most productive find themselves unable to accumulate significant capital. They are forced into the clutches of our central bank entourage for injections of the inflationary credit, which we are privileged to create out of nothing. The self-financing wealth of the legendary 19th century robber barons and early 20th century tycoons is no longer possible, since those wide-open conditions no longer exist. We were the advocates of the erection of the tax wall that is now in place. Our eternal vigilance is required in democratic countries to prevent our tax shield from being riddled by conniving legislators, who are usually of tax-oppressed upper-middle-class origins themselves. 2. Business regulation. When upstarts slip through our financial tentacles and tax shields, a second line of defense becomes vital. We control the licensing of radio and television to keep damaging information about our system from getting to the public or upsetting the political and social influence we have been exerting over a nation. This makes serious upstart-led mass political challenge impossible. Harassment by bureaucrats armed with arbitrary and voluminous industrial safety regulations is a new and increasingly effective technique to stifle raw competition against our established corporations. Security registration requirements, quote, to protect the small investor, unquote, can cause fatal delays in an upstart's ability to raise capital on the stock market. Ecological considerations are easily perverted to stymie the plans of those who would upset the stability of our carefully planned system. Antitrust law, however, is our ultimate weapon. There it is, it's right there. The handy doctrine of, quote, pure and perfect competition, unquote, which we have fostered in our universities, is ideally suited to convicting any successful competitor at our discretion. Also, product quality, safety, and testing regulations are excellent methods by which we insulate our established industries from potential competition. 3. Subsidies, tariffs, and foreign aid. Although direct subsidies can occasionally be procured for our entourage of corporations, by appealing to the desire of the masses to preserve jobs, this exploitative technique is usually too obvious. Tariffs are easily passed, but lead to retaliation against our foreign holdings. Foreign aid and government-guaranteed loans that are sure to be defaulted fit the bill perfectly under modern conditions. Foreign aid maintains our empire of foreign dictators abroad, while providing guaranteed, highly profitable sales to our corporations at home base. Foreign aid should always be contingent on the purchase of goods, usually military hardware, that only our entourage of firms can provide. Few people have the courage to oppose such altruistic aid to the starving masses of the Third World. 4. Centralization of power. Real division of power behind national, state, and local government is dangerous to our system. When local politicians have real autonomy, even in limited spheres, they can do much to enable upstarts to challenge our power. Our program is to bring all levels of government under our sway through such innovations as federal aid, revenue sharing, high federal taxation, and regional government. 5. Alliance with the lower classes. In order to keep our valuable regulatory machine in place and under our control, we must have the mass support of the numerous lower classes against vigorous but scarce middle-class upstarts. The best method is to provide the lower classes with subsidies at the expense of the middle class. This creates a mutual hatred that prevents the middle class from appealing effectively to the lower classes for support. Social Security, free health care, unemployment benefits, and direct welfare payments, while doing nothing for us directly, create a dependent class whose support for our critical measures can easily be made part of a package deal. Also, the major labor unions began with our financing and are led to this day by leaders of our choosing. No one can rise to or remain at the top of a rough and tumble union without our financial backing. In spite of their rebellious rhetoric, bought union leaders are the source of our power over the management of firms with widely held stock. Unions are the ultimate weapon we have for destroying otherwise invulnerable self-financing upstarts. Bread and circuses are as useful today as in Roman times for mobilizing the mob against our staid adversaries. The role of public education. In order to maintain our system of power, the institution of universal public education is indispensable. The anarchy of private education, in which any manner of dangerous ideas could be spread, cannot be tolerated. Thus we make private education financially impossible to all but the few, mostly the elite offspring of our financial entourage, by means of burdensome taxation and regulation. The primary purpose of public education is to inculcate the idea that our crucial institutions of coercion and monopoly were created for the public good by popular national heroes. Boy, they're doing a good job of that. To blunt the past power of the malefactors of great wealth. It is crucial to create the impression that, although the people have been exploited in the past, today the wealthy are at the mercy of an all-powerful government, which is finally in the hands of the people or do-good liberals. Oh, that's exactly the kind of government and U.S. history class you will get in a public school and a public university nowadays. A poli-sci class in a public junior college, say. That's it. That's right. We have one more paragraph, folks, and then we are done. For those of more sophistication who reject this Pollyanna view of reality, we promote the, quote, liberal reformer mentality, unquote. I guess he's talking about the types of people who listen to NPR and think they understand what's going on. Continuing, which holds that a new era of reform is on the verge of crushing forever the last vestiges of money-lordism. Of course, the reforms, after taking shape as a bewildering myriad of regulatory agencies and taxes, are found to be ineffective in subordinating our power to the popular will, whereupon we stir up another era of progressive reform. This ends Part 2 and the entirety of, this was Part 6, but the PDF that I got this from is divided into 2 parts. But this, for our purposes, this was Part 6, and this ends the whole book. And the book has been A Country Defeated in Victory by James Montgomery. You've been listening to Rejected Knowledge. Okay, so this is Part 6, and at last we are on what will be the final segment of A Country Defeated in Victory by James Montgomery. And no, you're not going to find this anyplace else, but you should. You should. All right, here we go. Part 6. Economics of Central Banking. Since division of labor is the key to all human achievement and satisfaction, a system of exchange is crucial. Barter is hopelessly complicated. A command economy in which each is told what to do and how he will be compensated is also hopelessly cumbersome and fails to take advantage of individual initiative, ability, and concrete knowledge. A medium of exchange, money, is the obvious solution. Unfamiliar with his reputation, and especially when competitive goldsmiths, always eager for more gold reserves, came into possession of his notes. To prevent a disastrous run on his gold reserves, note issuance had to be kept within bounds. But the spending power of over-issuance was a grave temptation. Especially relished was the power over government, industry, and merchants that the miraculous loan power of the goldsmith could obtain. Many succumbed to temptation, overextended themselves, and brought ruin to their depositors, while others slowly became wealthy bankers by pursuing conservative loan policies. According to present-day reasoning, central banks are instituted to protect the public from periodic financial catastrophe at the hands of unscrupulous fractional reserve bankers. The excuse given as protection is far from the truth. Central banks are established to remove the limitation on overissuance that reality normally places on a competitive banking system. As early as ancient Babylon and India, central banking, the art of monopolizing the issuance of money, had been developed into a perfect method for looting the general public. Even today, many bankers copy the traditions of the earlier exploitative priesthoods and design their banks to resemble temples. Defenses of central banking are simply part of the deception that lies at the heart of all power elites. Moreover, the receipt was useless to a thief without the endorsing signature. At some point, a goldsmith realized that there was no reason he couldn't loan out some of the gold for interest as long as he kept gold on hand sufficient to meet the fairly predictable withdrawal rate. After all, he promised simply to pay on demand, not hold the gold as such. Better yet, he could simply issue more receipts for gold than he had gold on hand, and the receipts, renamed notes, could circulate freely among the populace as money. However, he soon found that there was a definite limit set on this process by reality. Not all the extra notes he issued circulated forever among the public. The rate of note redemption began to increase rapidly as the receipts passed into the hands of people. When left to themselves, people of a given geographical area settled upon a durable luxury commodity, usually gold or silver, to use as money. Because money is a store of value, as well as a medium of exchange, people saved part of their gold income rather than spending it all. This gold was often stored in the vaults of a local goldsmith, the precursor of the modern banker, for safekeeping. The depositor received a receipt that entitled him to an equal quantity and quality of gold on demand from the goldsmith. This receipt could be negotiable by endorsing it over to a seller of goods who in turn could exchange the receipt for gold from the goldsmith. Either the receipt or the gold served as money, and the receipt was easier to carry than transporting the gold it represented.